I'm writing to tell you how I really feel. You probably haven't noticed, but for the longest time, I've always been there for you. I want you to know what I've done, and I hope by me opening up to you like this, you will hopefully feel the same way for me, and we can be happy together forever. I remember when we were both 13, when you first transferred to my school. As soon as you walked in, I thought you were the most beautiful girl in the world. When your tranquil blue eyes crossed mine, even though it was for a brief moment as you scanned across the strange faces in the class, I knew I wanted to be with you forever. But my heart was broken straight away when you paired off with some other guy to show you around the school. You didn't really notice me much. You were always with your group of friends that was so different to mine. Who am I kidding? I never really had any friends. The one thing that got me through all those years of loneliness was watching you, admiring everything you did. The way you gracefully went through your day left me in awe, day in, day out. As the years went by, you seemed pretty popular both with the guys and the girls. You were sought after by the popular guys in the entire school, even the older ones, but you shrugged them off. The girls loved how you looked after yourself. You always had your makeup and hair perfect, which made you admired, but hated. It's sad, but it's human nature to be jealous, and we are all guilty of this crime. What they ended up doing, however, was far out of line. I watched as they pushed you when the teachers weren't looking. They shoved you into any nearby hard object, which, more often than not, was the wall. When you stumbled and slammed into it, the teachers would turn and say, "Watch where you're going, dear," and go about their business, blissfully unaware of what actually happened. Watching this happen every other day burned me up inside. Seeing you face this tournament because you were better than them, it was painful to see every time it happened. I hoped it would die down, but it got worse. I saw when the bullies knocked your drink over when you least expected it, just because the most popular guy asked you out. I was there when they set your bag on fire in woodworking class because they thought you condescending when you tried to help with their work. And I caught a glimpse the time they actually threw you to the ground outside the school gates and kicked you until you cried, simply because you tried to tell the teacher what they were doing. After that incident, they followed you home. Usually, they wouldn't do anything but yell abuse at you. The worst part was, you'd never know when they would snap and attack you, keeping just inches from your back. It tore me apart to see the girl I loved so vulnerable. I wanted to fix it. What I knew was that there were 3 main bullies. I knew more, but they seemed to do it out of peer pressure. The main culprit was that narcissistic whore, Bethany. Beth was jealous of everything about you. All the things I knew made you great burned her up inside. She used to be the center of attention, and my God, did she love it. All the guys wanted to be with her, all the girls wanted to be her. The only difference is that she abused this attention for personal gain. She slept with the guys who showered her with gifts or had their mommy and daddy to pay for everything. She only hung around with girls she deemed lower than her, and she did this so they wouldn't be a threat to her God complex. But slowly, over the years of you being in school, she lost her influence. By then, all eyes were on you. The second one who bore a grudge against you was that asshole Chris. He asked you to the school's annual dance in front of both his friends and yours, and you rejected him like all the others. But what made this time different was that he ran off crying. Because he was publicly embarrassed. In school, that meant a lot. He denied liking you and lost all his friends, so he took his frustrations out on the one he thought caused all of it. You. The last person was Julie. She had it bad for you ever since the guy she liked started talking about how amazing you were, whilst not paying any attention to her, even after she performed some, well, let's say, desperate deeds for him. During the last week of school, I knew they had something special planned for you, so I took it upon myself to deal with it. Because I love you, and I didn't want your last few days at school to be ruined. The first person I convinced was Chris. Now, he was much stronger than me, being into all the school sports. Plus, the steroids meant I wouldn't be able to take him in a simple one-on-one fight. But in the end, that would be his downfall. I knew where he kept his steroids. It wasn't hard to figure out. Our school's security and reputation was so low, there was no real need to hide it. I got his locker combination by simply saying I forgot mine, and the teacher gave me a list of everyone's combinations. Yeah, that's right. They have no concept of security in this school. I cracked open his locker with ease, leaving no trace behind. I found his next shot and squirted a little bit out, then pulled the plunge back to where it was, leaving a considerable air bubble. Chris was no doctor, nor did he have any clue how everything worked altogether. He just injected himself and trained in the school gym. I bought a pass for the gym myself and pretended to train. He eventually showed up, laughing hysterically with his new friends. Enjoy it while you can, I thought. It's not going to last long. He went to his locker. Not long after, he came out in his training attire, a determined look on his face. He was ready to start. He was fine for a while, but eventually slowed down. He had a puzzled look on his face as his body slowly gave up, and eventually the cardiac arrest settled in, and he was on the floor. People tried CPR, but there was no defibrillator around, since it was a school filled with teenagers. Who would expect a heart attack in a place like this? I smiled and walked out before the paramedics arrived. It was already too late for him. Working my way up the list, Julie was next. She was always jealous of the way every guy liked you. I silently slipped through a window without her noticing. I knew her parents were out, so if she made a noise, no one would come to her aid. I pounced on her while she was sleeping, pinning her down and tied her hands to the bedpost and then her legs. I pulled out several jars from my bag, each one almost black. Upon closer inspection, the jars wriggled with movement. They were full of all the creepy crawlers one would typically find in the bottom of one's garden. I took my time filling them up with every insect I could find. I wanted her to understand the pain you must have felt all the time she was shouting abuse at you, hurting you, making you feel lower than you really are. I propped her mouth open with one of those plastic rings a dentist used for a long procedure. Then, I poured each jar down her throat. With every jar, her screaming was muffled just a bit more, drowned out by the buzzing and scuttling noises of the bugs adjusting to their new home. Tears streamed down her face as I told her how all of this was for you. A few jars in, and I could feel the bugs crawling through her stomach against my legs, having sat on her stomach this whole time. By then, she had pretty much passed out from the pain. I waited a moment, then poured water on her face and slapped her until she responded. As punishment, I took the ring off her mouth and poured water down her throat, making her swallow the insects and causing them to go in a panicked frenzy. On the fifth jar, the pain of all the insects burrowing into her internal organs and all the internal bleeding caused her to pass away. Not peacefully, of course, but I saved the worst for last. I had something special planned for Bethany. She was by far the worst to you. She made your life a living hell, and this was unacceptable. No one as perfect as you should have ever had the displeasure of knowing these people. So, I carefully set the pieces and waited. One day, I got a head start. I skipped my last class, but no one noticed, not even the teacher. This shows just how much I was noticed in school. By this time, I'd memorized that horse route home and waited in an archway. I knew she walked past this area every time. I waited and thought about what I was going to do and how it was all for you. Though I didn't have to think so much, because I already had it all planned out. When I caught sight of her, I grabbed her and pulled her to the ground. She was kicking and screaming, but at this point on her journey home, no one was ever around. The archway led to an abandoned, derelict church. I dragged her away from the path and to the building, so no witness could intervene or find her body. Not anytime soon. I followed my routine and secured her arms and legs to a post, so I knew there wouldn't be much of a struggle. After that, I gagged her, as I knew she'd make a lot of noise for what I was about to do. I slowly pulled out my knife, making sure she saw its deadly glimmer. I placed the point of it on her lower leg and smiled as she reacted to the sharp point of the blade. Then, I gently pushed down, making sure the wound was clean as it slipped into her flesh. It took a while, but eventually the knife's handle was touching her skin. I took my time pulling it out, making sure the wound didn't rupture and spill that so easily recognized crimson liquid. That would have meant her death, and that would be too easy. As soon as the tip exited her body, I wrapped the incision with a bandage, applying enough pressure to keep the bleeding to a minimum. Then, I placed the knife a little higher up her leg, doing the same. I stared into her eyes as she helplessly watched me do this over and over, all over her body. After every stab, I spoke about how you didn't deserve what she did to you. Eventually, her whole body was nothing but red bandages. She was barely conscious when I pierced the knife through her heart. I can imagine you're screaming now. In fact, I know you'll be. And I will be close enough to hear it. By the time you stop, I'll know you've gotten this far into my letter, so I'll start making my way in. It's pretty easy to get into your house once you've done it a few times. You probably thought it was your parents who left this note in your room. No, it was me. Don't be afraid of the noises downstairs. It's only me. Put the phone down. I know by now you've got it in your hand, but I cut the phone line. Don't bother crying for your parents, if you haven't done so already. I've already silenced them. You can stop your screaming now. I'm right outside your door. Soon, it'll just be you and me. Together. Forever. Lots of love. Your secret admirer.